Imagine waking up one morning realizing that one impulsive decision, one unforgettable night, has the power to destroy your career or transform your life forever. She thought she had made the biggest mistake of her professional life. But what she didn't know was that her boss, a powerful millionaire, had already made a decision of his own, and that decision was love. Fear is one of the most powerful emotions a human being can experience. It has the ability to blur logic, exaggerate danger, and convince us that the worst possible outcome is not only likely but inevitable. In the story of the woman who tried to resign after a night with her boss, fear became her loudest voice, drowning out reason, possibility, and the truth she didn't yet know. That single emotion pushed her into a decision that was heavy, heartbreaking, and entirely based on assumptions. But her story reflects a much bigger truth. In life, fear often writes chapters that reality never intended. Fear speaks in what-ifs. What if I ruin my career? What if everyone finds out? What if he thinks I crossed the line? What if this mistake defines me forever? What if I lose everything I worked for? These thoughts don't come from facts. They come from imagined consequences. Fear fills in the blanks when we don't have the answers. Rather than allowing the truth to reveal itself, fear rushes to paint the worst case scenario, convincing us it's the only scenario. It's the same instinct that made her draft her resignation letter before even looking her boss in the eye. She believed she knew exactly what he would say, how he would react, and what judgment he would make because fear had already delivered its verdict. In moments of vulnerability, fear becomes a storyteller. It rewrites the truth, amplifies our insecurities, and makes us believe that we are powerless, unworthy, or unsafe. She wasn't just afraid of losing her job. She was afraid of losing her identity. Her career was something she built with discipline, late nights, sacrifices, and pride. To her, professionalism was the foundation of who she was. So when that boundary blurred for one night, fear didn't whisper, it screamed. It told her she had crossed an unfixable line. It made her see herself as someone who had messed up beyond repair. But fear does something else too. It isolates. It tells you that you are alone in the consequences. It tells you that no one will understand your side of the story. It tells you that the other person involved will judge you harsher than you judge yourself. It makes you forget that the other person has emotions too, that they were part of the same moment, that they may be feeling something entirely different, something not rooted in fear, but in clarity. Fear made her blind to the possibility that her boss had also been up all night, not regretting, but realizing what she meant to him, realizing what that night sparked inside him, realizing that he didn't want her to disappear from his life. Fear did not allow her to imagine that maybe, just maybe, the story unfolding was not a tragedy, but the beginning of something profound. We all experience moments like this, moments where fear convinces us to run before we've even taken the time to understand what we're running from. A misunderstanding triggers panic. A single mistake feels like a disaster. A small conflict feels like the end of a relationship. A risk becomes a threat instead of an opportunity. And the cruel part is that fear often arrives disguised as protection. It tells us it's keeping us safe. It tells us it's helping us avoid embarrassment, rejection, or loss. But in reality, fear often pushes us into the very outcomes we hoped to avoid. If she had submitted that resignation letter, fear would have cost her not just her job, but a future she didn't even know was waiting for her. Fear leads to assumptions, and assumptions are dangerous. They close doors that haven't even been opened yet. They silence conversations that could bring clarity. They cut off connections that could grow into something meaningful. Fear makes us act without evidence. It makes us believe without questioning. It makes us react without understanding. But fear forgets one thing. Most of the worst scenarios we imagine never actually happen. The mind can create disasters far bigger than reality would ever produce. In her case, the reality was the opposite of what she feared. The man she thought would reject her was instead preparing to confess that he had fallen in love with her long before that night ever happened. Fear never gave her the chance to consider that truth. And that is the deeper lesson. Fear is not a reliable narrator. It is shaped by our insecurities, past experiences, and doubts. It magnifies risks and minimizes possibilities. It locks us inside outcomes we have created in our imagination, not outcomes rooted in real events. When fear takes control, it prevents us from asking the most important questions. What if things don't go wrong? What if the truth is different from what I'm imagining? What if the outcome is better than I expect? What if this moment is not the end, but the beginning? Fear rarely considers hope. It rarely considers love. It rarely considers growth. It pushes us to prepare for impact, even when the road ahead is clear. And so, before knowing the truth, she prepared for the worst. Not because reality demanded it, but because fear insisted on it. Life is a chain of moments most ordinary, some unforgettable, and a few so powerful that they split your timeline into before and after. These moments don't ask for permission, and they don't wait for us to be ready. They arrive suddenly, unexpectedly, silently, yet they carry enough force to redirect our destiny. In the story of the woman and her millionaire boss, that one night wasn't just an emotional mistake or a professional complication. It was a turning point, a moment that carried the potential to change everything, not because of what happened, but because of what it demanded: courage. A single moment can challenge your beliefs. It can test your confidence. It can shake your sense of control. It can push you toward choices you never thought you'd have to make. But most importantly, it can reveal who you really are. That night wasn't just a blurring of professional boundaries. It was a moment of vulnerability, honesty, connection, and truth, a truth she wasn't ready to acknowledge. She wasn't afraid of the night itself. She was afraid of the aftermath, afraid of stepping into a future she couldn't predict, afraid of facing the consequences, the conversations, the realizations that might follow. Yet, whether she wanted to or not, life had already shifted. Moments like these do not determine our path, our response to them does. You can let a moment define you negatively, or you can let it open a door to something bigger. When she woke up the next morning, her instinct was to run. Running felt safe. Running meant staying in control. Running meant avoiding judgment, awkwardness, or the possibility of emotional pain. But running also meant walking away from an opportunity her mind hadn't even allowed her to imagine. We often underestimate how quickly life can change. You meet someone who alters your understanding of love. You take a job that transforms your confidence. You make a decision that sets off a chain reaction. You embrace or avoid a moment that ends up shaping your entire future. Sometimes, the moments that scare us are the very moments designed to elevate us. But here's the challenge. When life hands you a turning point, it rarely comes labeled as a blessing. It arrives looking like a complication, a mistake, a risk, a storm. It arrives wrapped in confusion and uncertainty. Only later, sometimes much later, do we look back and realize that the moment we feared most was the moment that saved us, changed us, or pushed us toward everything we ever wanted. For her, that moment came disguised as regret. She saw the night with her boss as a threat to her stability. She saw it as a lapse in judgment, not a doorway to a deeper connection. She was so occupied with fear that she missed the pull of fate, the quiet whisper of possibility, the unfolding of something she didn't think she deserved. Because one moment can change your life, but only if you are brave enough to face it head on. Courage doesn't mean being fearless. Courage means feeling fear and still choosing to confront the truth. It means standing still when your instinct tells you to flee. It means opening the door when every insecurity inside you begs you to hide. Her boss, the millionaire, the man known for his composure, understood this in a way she didn't. He knew the moment mattered. He didn't hide from it. He didn't deny it. He didn't bury it under professionalism or distance. Instead, he confronted it. He embraced it. He allowed himself to acknowledge the shift in his heart. He treated the moment as a beginning, not a mistake. This contrast reveals a universal truth about life, changing moments. Some people are brave enough to lean into them, and others allow fear to pull them away. Most of us spend our lives waiting for big changes, waiting for success, waiting for love, waiting for clarity, waiting for something extraordinary to happen. But the truth is, extraordinary things rarely announce themselves. They hide inside ordinary decisions. They hide inside risks. They hide inside situations that feel uncomfortable, unpredictable, or overwhelming. The question is not whether such moments will come, they always do. The question is whether we will recognize them, accept them, and step into them with courage. She believed resigning was her way of protecting herself. But maybe what she truly needed protection from was not the moment itself, but her fear of it. That night wasn't good or bad on its own. It was neutral. Its meaning depended entirely on how she chose to respond, and that is the essence of life. Moments are powerful, but they are only opportunities. They hold potential, not guarantees. To unlock that potential, you need bravery. Bravery to face discomfort. Bravery to have difficult conversations. Bravery to accept what your heart feels. Bravery to risk being misunderstood. Bravery to stand in a moment that could reshape your entire future. Sometimes the direction of your life changes the instant you decide to stop running and start facing the truth. Boundaries are the invisible lines we draw to protect our values, our professionalism, and our sense of identity. They are essential. They create order, clarity, and emotional safety. She had spent her entire career living by these boundaries. They were her compass, her armor, her shield against complications that could threaten the future she worked so hard to build. But one thing people rarely talk about is that boundaries, while healthy, can sometimes become prisons if they are too rigid. When we create strict lines out of fear rather than genuine self-respect, those lines stop guiding us and start confining us. They prevent us from acknowledging what we truly feel, what we truly want, or what is truly unfolding in our reality. She prided herself on professionalism. She believed in maintaining distance, clarity, and control in the workplace. To her, crossing a line even unintentionally felt like breaking a core part of herself. But what she didn't realize was that boundaries should exist to protect your truth, not hide it. And the truth was this: she had feelings for him long before that night. She admired him, she respected him, she noticed the way he spoke to her differently than he spoke to others. She saw the way his eyes softened when she entered the room. She felt the connection growing slowly, quietly, unspoken but undeniably real. Yet she refused to acknowledge any of it, not even to herself. She buried every sign, every spark, every lingering moment behind the walls she built. She kept telling herself, no, this can't mean anything. This shouldn't happen. This isn't professional. And in doing so, she lied to the one person she could never escape herself. There's a difference between having boundaries and hiding feelings, between being disciplined and being emotionally dishonest, between protecting your career and denying your heart. When that night happened, a moment of truth that broke through months of restraint, her instinct wasn't to reflect or confront her feelings. Instead, she panicked. Her boundaries weren't flexible enough to help her navigate a complicated moment. They were rigid, unforgiving, built on the belief that any slip was a catastrophe. So she reacted the only way she knew how, by trying to run, by resigning, by cutting ties, by pretending the connection never existed, by convincing herself that distance was the only responsible choice. But boundaries built on fear do not serve us. They suffocate us. Honesty with oneself matters just as much as integrity with others, because when you suppress emotions, you do not erase them, you only silence them temporarily. The truth always finds a way to rise, sometimes through a mistake, sometimes through a moment of vulnerability, sometimes through a night that changes everything. Her boss, the millionaire who had spent years keeping his own emotions locked away, understood this paradox better than she did. He also had boundaries, strict ones shaped by power, status, and the weight of expectations. But unlike her, he was willing to confront his truth. He didn't pretend that the night meant nothing. He didn't bury his feelings under authority. He didn't hide behind rules or social expectations. He allowed himself to recognize what he had been feeling long before that night, that she mattered to him. Deeply, more than he had allowed himself to admit. His boundaries were strong, yes, but his honesty was stronger. And that's where the true difference lies. Boundaries protect our external world. Honesty protects our internal world. When one dominates the other, imbalance happens. If you only follow boundaries, you may lose opportunities for genuine connection. If you ignore boundaries completely, you may lose clarity and control. But the most painful losses occur when people know the truth but refuse to admit it even to themselves. She resigned because she believed she had broken a rule. He stopped her because he believed she had opened a door. Two people, two boundaries, two truths. Only one of them was honest about what their hearts were saying. What she needed at that moment was not stricter boundaries, but deeper self-awareness. She needed space to ask herself, why does this matter so much to me? Why does being vulnerable scare me? Why am I more ashamed of my feelings than honest about them? What am I running from, the consequences or the truth? Boundaries without self-awareness become barriers. Boundaries without emotional honesty become excuses. Boundaries without courage become limitations. And life, real life, meaningful life, asks us to find the balance between structure and sincerity. It asks us to protect ourselves, yes, but not at the cost of denying our soul. It asks us to act with maturity, but also with authenticity. It asks us to be disciplined, but also brave. Her mistake was not that she crossed a boundary. Her mistake was believing that the boundary mattered more than the truth inside her heart. And that is the lesson she had yet to learn. Boundaries define your actions, but honesty defines your growth. Love does not follow rules. It does not obey logic, timing, or the boundaries society creates. It doesn't care about professional titles, social positions, or the carefully built walls we hide behind. It arrives on its own terms quietly, unpredictably, and often in the very places we believe it can never exist. For her, the workplace was the last place she expected to experience anything close to love. It was a space of structure, responsibility, and clear expectations. She woke up every morning with purpose, to work hard, stay professional, and climb the ladder with dignity. Romance had no place in her routine. Not there, not with him, not with someone whose presence carried power, authority, and a level of emotional distance she never imagined crossing. Love was not supposed to grow in a place like that. Yet it did. It began with small details, the way he listened when she spoke, the way he relied on her in moments of pressure, the way he gave her responsibilities he trusted no one else with. She noticed the brief glances he stole when he thought she wasn't looking. She felt his presence in the room before he said a single word. These were not moments she labeled as love. They were simply ripples on the surface of a lake she refused to look into, because love wasn't supposed to be there. But love doesn't need permission to exist. It grows where it wants. It blooms in silence. It forms in moments that feel insignificant at the time, but later hold the weight of everything. For him, the realization came slowly, then all at once. He wasn't a man who fell easily. He wasn't a man who allowed his heart to lead. He was successful, powerful, and used to being in control, and love is the one force that humbles even the strongest minds. He didn't expect to fall for someone he worked with. He didn't expect her smile to linger in his thoughts long after the workday ended. He didn't expect her voice to become his comfort, her presence his calm, her absence something he felt deeper than he admitted. But love doesn't care about expectations. It simply chooses, and it chose her, quietly, patiently, completely. The impossibility of their connection made it all the more undeniable. They were two people standing on opposite sides of a line, the line of professionalism, power, and perception. She believed crossing that line would destroy everything. He believed crossing it would reveal everything. She saw impossibility. He saw inevitability. And that is the strange, beautiful nature of love. Sometimes the places we think are wrong for love are exactly where it is meant to grow. Love has a habit of appearing in unlikely places because unlikely places are where our guard is highest. She wasn't looking for love at work. That made her authentic, unaware, vulnerable in the most genuine way. He wasn't looking for love in his office either. That made his feelings real, uncontaminated by desire or convenience. They weren't performing for each other. They weren't trying to impress each other. They were simply being themselves in a space that forced honesty through shared challenges and everyday interactions. Love thrives in authenticity. It grows in honesty. It deepens in silence. It reveals itself in unexpected moments, not grand gestures. The night they shared wasn't the beginning of something new. It was the revelation of something that was quietly building all along. That night didn't create their feelings, it exposed them. It brought to light a connection that both of them had felt but neither dared to name. She believed the night was a mistake. But mistakes don't feel that natural. Mistakes don't feel that safe. Mistakes don't feel like home. He believed the night was a moment of truth. A moment that stripped away excuses. A moment that allowed him to admit what he had been feeling for far too long. Love appears in unexpected places because it teaches us something important. The heart does not follow the rules we make for ourselves. We say, this is not the right time. This is not the right place. This is not the right person. But love responds, it is exactly the right moment, because this is the moment your heart is awake. It is exactly the right place, because this is where your soul feels alive. It is exactly the right person, because no one else could move you the same way. She believed love could not exist in the space she shared with him. He believed love existed precisely because of that space, the proximity, the shared victories, the trust that formed naturally, the admiration that grew with every interaction. Love does not wait for your consent. It does not knock politely. It enters quietly and transforms everything before you notice the change. Sometimes the greatest loves grow in the most unlikely soil. Sometimes the connections that feel impossible are the ones that change your life the most. Sometimes the person you were never supposed to love becomes the person your heart was always meant to find. Silence is powerful, but not always in a good way. Silence can protect us, calm us, and give us space to think. Yet the same silence can also destroy relationships before they even begin. Silence allows fear to grow. It allows assumptions to multiply. It allows misunderstandings to take root so deeply that the truth becomes almost impossible to find again. In the story of the woman and her millionaire boss, silence was not just an absence of words, it was the loudest barrier between them. After the night they shared, they needed clarity. They needed honesty. They needed to look each other in the eye and confront what the moment meant. But instead, the morning arrived heavy with unspoken fears, unexpressed emotions, and unanswered questions. She chose silence because she assumed she already knew the outcome. She believed that if she stayed quiet, she could escape the consequences. She believed that if she left without a conversation, she could protect herself from embarrassment or rejection. But silence does not protect the heart, it isolates it. Communication could have changed everything for her. One honest conversation could have shattered her fears. One sentence could have opened the door to understanding. One moment of courage could have saved her from days of anxiety and a resignation letter that she typed with trembling hands. Instead of asking him how he felt, she told herself a story. Instead of listening to him, she listened to her doubt. Instead of speaking the truth, she buried it under the weight of assumption. And that is the trap silence creates when we don't communicate. We replace truth with imagination. And imagination, especially when fueled by fear, leads us to the darkest conclusions. She assumed he would be disappointed. She assumed he would think less of her. She assumed he would never want to see her again. She assumed he would draw a line that she had crossed and could never return from. But none of these assumptions were real. They were echoes of her insecurity, not reflections of his feelings. They came from her fear of consequences, not from any evidence of rejection. She was battling a storm that existed only in her mind, a storm that communication could have calmed instantly. While she was drowning in silence, he was preparing to speak. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't running. He wasn't regretting. He was ready to have the conversation she feared most. Because communication is not just about words, it is about connection. It is about truth meeting truth. It is about giving someone the chance to show their heart instead of assuming what is inside it. He wanted to tell her that the night meant something to him, that he had been feeling something long before that he wasn't looking at her as an employee anymore, but as someone who had quietly changed the rhythm of his life. But he never got the chance, not until he discovered her resignation letter. Silence had almost cost them everything, and this is not just their story, it is a universal experience. How many relationships have ended not because of something terrible, but because of something unsaid? How many friendships have been lost because both sides waited for the other to speak first? How many opportunities have been missed because fear convinced someone to stay silent? Communication prevents heartbreak because it creates space for truth to breathe. It removes the fog of confusion. It exposes fears to the light. It offers clarity where silence offers chaos. When you communicate, you give the other person the chance to understand you, and you also give yourself the chance to understand them. Silence, on the other hand, becomes a breeding ground for misinterpretation. It turns small uncertainties into heavy doubts. It turns simple misunderstandings into emotional wounds. It makes people feel unvalued, unseen, unheard, even when that was never the intention. The heartbreaking part is this: most heartbreak doesn't come from lack of love, it comes from lack of communication. She wasn't heartbroken because he rejected her. She was heartbroken because she thought he would. She wasn't devastated because he pushed her away. She was devastated because she never asked him how he felt. She created a distance that didn't need to exist. And isn't that one of the greatest tragedies of silence? That it creates pain out of possibilities, that it turns potential into loss, that it convinces us to walk away from something beautiful before we even know what it could be. If she had spoken to him just once, everything could have been different. A conversation could have spared her days of fear. A conversation could have saved her from resigning. A conversation could have shown her that he wasn't letting go, that he had already fallen deeply, unquestionably in love with her. But silence doesn't give love a chance. Communication does. If words had been exchanged sooner, she would have known the truth, that the man she feared facing was the same man who was preparing to confess he couldn't imagine losing her. Courage is often misunderstood. People imagine courage as a roaring confidence, a heart that never trembles, a voice that never shakes, a mind untouched by fear. But real courage is far quieter, far more honest, and far more human. It is not the elimination of fear. It is the willingness to step forward even when fear is screaming in your ears. It is choosing to act, not because you feel safe, but because something inside you knows the moment demands more than silence, more than retreat, more than hiding. In her story, courage was the missing piece, the thing she needed more than anything but struggled to find. Fear was already in full control. Fear told her she ruined everything. Fear told her she crossed a line she could never uncross. Fear convinced her that leaving without a word was easier than facing truth, facing him, or facing herself. She thought courage was about feeling brave. She waited for the moment when her heart would stop racing, when the shame would disappear, when she would feel ready. But courage doesn't wait for readiness, courage creates readiness. She didn't understand yet that courage is born the moment you act, not the moment you feel fearless. Fear will always be present in the biggest moments of your life. It's there when you fall in love, when you take a risk, when you stand up for yourself, when you face the unknown. Fear is a sign that the moment matters. Where fear exists, possibility exists too. He, on the other hand, understood courage in a way she did not. He felt fear too, fear of rejection, fear of crossing boundaries, fear of losing her, fear of opening his own heart after years of keeping it guarded. But he did something she didn't. He acted anyway. That is courage, not because he lacked fear, but because he chose not to be controlled by it. He walked into the office with his heart exposed. He was prepared to confront the night they shared. He was ready to speak the truth she was running away from. He knew the risks. He knew the position he held. He knew the gravity of the situation, but he also knew that silence would cost him more than honesty ever could. Courage is recognizing that fear is a companion, not an enemy. Fear stands beside you, whispering worst-case scenarios. Courage stands on the other side, pointing toward possibility. Which voice you follow determines the direction of your life. She followed fear, and it led her toward resignation. He followed courage, and it led him toward confession. Their choices reveal a universal truth. Fear pushes you toward escape, while courage pulls you toward transformation. Courage is choosing the harder path when fear is offering you the easier one. It is telling the truth when silence feels safer. It is staying when leaving feels like protection. It is facing someone when running feels like relief. But courage also requires understanding yourself deeply. It requires acknowledging your emotions, your desires, your hopes, even the ones that scare you. She wasn't afraid of him. She was afraid of her own feelings. She wasn't avoiding the situation. She was avoiding the part of herself that wanted him. And that is where the greatest courage is needed, the courage to confront your own heart. It's easy to be brave in external situations, to speak boldly, to defend others, to handle crises. But the hardest courage is internal courage, admitting what you truly want, accepting what you feel, and daring to pursue what matters to you. Fear told her, run. Courage would have told her, stay, speak. Listen. Fear made her see the night as a threat. Courage would have shown her it was a truth waiting to unfold. Fear made her resign. Courage would have made her ask one question: what does this mean to you? Imagine how different things would have been if she chose courage in that moment. Imagine how quickly her doubts would have dissolved if she simply allowed herself to face him. Imagine how relieved she would have felt hearing the truth instead of fighting imagined disasters. That is what courage gives you: clarity. Fear gives you chaos. Fear keeps you in your head. Courage brings you into the real world where real answers exist. Fear makes you assume the worst. Courage gives you a chance for the best. Fear closes doors. Courage opens them, and sometimes courage is not loud or dramatic. Sometimes it is a small whisper inside you saying, try. Sometimes it is the simple act of showing up. Sometimes it is the decision to not walk away. Sometimes it is choosing conversation over avoidance. Sometimes it is choosing truth over assumptions. In love, courage matters more than perfection. In relationships, courage matters more than certainty. In life, courage matters more than control. Because life-changing moments do not wait for you to feel strong. They wait for you to act in spite of your fears. She didn't know it yet, but the moment she stopped running would be the moment she discovered that courage was the key to everything she thought she lost, including him. In the end, this story reminds us of something beautifully human, that life rarely unfolds the way we plan it. We try to control our paths, manage our emotions, guard our boundaries, and maintain our perfect ideas of professionalism or strength. But sometimes, life steps in with its own script. A script written with unexpected connections, difficult choices, and moments that challenge everything we think we know about ourselves. She tried to resign because she believed that walking away was the safest choice. But what she didn't realize was that life was inviting her to walk towards something instead. He thought his wealth, his authority, and his status made him invulnerable, yet love revealed his truest, most vulnerable self. And in their fear, in their confusion, in their hesitation, they both discovered something rare, the kind of honesty that changes people. So, when we strip everything else away, the job titles, the mistakes, the worries, the assumptions, we're left with something simple, something universal. The courage to accept what our hearts already know. Because sometimes the moment you fear the most is the moment that holds the greatest possibility, and sometimes the person you think you're losing is the one who was meant to find you all along.